there's so much data around, and technology to digest this data got so much better. Why survey people? Instead, why don't we look at all of our call center data, all of the customer chats, complaints, sales notes, reviews?
You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Oh, I am so excited today. Yeah, okay, I know. I'm really excited for almost every guest, right? Today, though, we get to do something new. A guest from a country we've not covered before in CX Passport. It's a place I've always wanted to visit. So today we'll get to do that vicariously as we talk with our guest, Alyona Medelyan, co-founder and CEO of Thematic, talking to us from New Zealand. That's right, New Zealand. We finally get a guest from New Zealand, and I am extremely excited about that. All right, so we know that AI continues to be the hot topic out there. I recognize that the term AI is quite general. And for many of us, we've been involved in AI for a while now. Bots, data, sentiment analysis, and others. Yeah, for a bit now. Yet, for the most part, our mass cultural awareness of it came about through the amazing progress of generative AI over the last year or so. Well, Alyona has us all beat. Back in 1998, let me say that again, 1998, she was already consulting in the general language processing subfield of AI. She's seen the evolution firsthand. Landing in the customer experience space about 8 years ago, Alyona knows how to actually, not with hype, but with actual results, weave AI and customer experience together. Today's episode records when I'm at peak Southern Hemisphere jealousy, as it is a solid winter here in North Texas and a glorious summer in New Zealand. Man, how I would want to chase summer each year by switching hemispheres. Well, guess what? Alyona did just that. Always a treat to talk with a global traveler. Alyona, welcome to CX Passport.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's have some fun here today. So in that intro, I mentioned you've been in this AI world since the late 90s. With the release of Chat...
Small correction. I haven't been consulting from 98. 98, I was still a student, but I discovered this field of AI completely randomly in a math lecture. I was studying languages to become a German and English interpreter.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
That's
really different.
Back in Ukraine, yes, but applied math was one of the subjects we had to take. And the professor said, oh, by the way, there's also people who use computers to translate text automatically. So I was like, why am I studying then this? This is all going to be fixed within years. And I want to join those people working
right
on the problems of building those algorithms.
Well, I'm glad that you corrected me, and I tend to, I take good care with my introductions. I am embarrassed that I made a gaffe there, but I love that gaffe has resulted in something I didn't even know, as we talked before, of this origin story of involved in learning languages and all of that before even getting involved in something. And I by the way, I chuckle at it'll be a couple years till we just have computers do all the translation for us. Well, if that was your exposure back there at university in Ukraine, you've seen this evolution, and you probably even chuckle at folks like us who think that, you hear the AI, air quotes for those of you that are just listening, experts that are out there. You've been doing this for decades. So talk to me about those early days of AI and what was it like then, and then how it's evolved to where we are today.
Yeah, so back in the days, people have been working on using computers to understand language from the moment computers existed. Mm-hmm. So it's been, I guess, soon close to a century. But when I started studying in this field, people were trying to figure out how can we gather as much text as we can that a computer can read through within a reasonable time And from this text, how can we infer language ideas? And I'd like to share this really fun example. So there was this notion of patterns, like a speech pattern. For example, banana, apple, and other fruit, right? So, and other could be a speech pattern to recognize it. An author wrote a book called Lawyers and Other Reptiles. And so this whole thing fell out of the window.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's attributing that. Oh my gosh. Well, so you've seen that those early days. It's obviously a lot different now. Talk to me about that evolution. What are you seeing now?
Well, it all became more and more statistical. So those early patterns were first examples of how can we scan through a lot of text and figure out the word meanings, and it then has moved into something we call word embeddings, where every word can be represented as a vector in a multidimensional vector space, and then you can do things like king minus man plus woman equals, and the computer tells you, oh, it's a queen.
Okay.
So something that basically gives us an idea of that actually computer understands the meaning of the words king, man, and woman, and can make these inferences. And with ChatGPT, it just all became even more advanced. And now ChatGPT or those large language models can analyze text and create text better than many humans can, which I have not expected to happen in my lifetime, and neither did a lot of my colleagues who have PhDs, and even the guy who came up with the whole deep learning. There were just people who kept throwing more and more data and throwing more and more computing resources, and even they were like we thought something cool will happen, but this has surpassed our expectations, and how amazing it is.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
And I try to, it would be impossible, but it's almost, if we could have the late 90s you and the current you see what it is today and just watch the shock and the amazement of what was expected back in the late 90s and what we're seeing now. You've made that move over to customer experience. And I know that was part of your reasoning for starting Thematic several years ago. I amplify that a little bit more. What inspired you to start Thematic? How was it going to solve some of the challenges that you were seeing out there?
Well, I knew that the skills that I gained at university and working at a few different companies, including Google, were really, really useful for companies, but I wasn't sure what is a problem worth solving. And so I started consulting in this general area of NLP, machine learning. People ask me to create all sorts of different applications for different use cases. And then within a year, several companies reached out and they had the same problem. They wanted to understand what is driving their net promoter score. So this was, and this was the moment where I dropped everything and started working on this problem, because I realized that it's an area where both the customers benefit from having their voice heard. The companies who are listening to their customers will also benefit by building something more useful and growing faster. So I felt like it's a great thing to work on, and I haven't stopped. And it's been now 8 years.
Yeah, well, and so that was the inspiration for it. How was, like, at your very beginning when you were thinking of this, how was Thematic going to solve some of those challenges that you were seeing?
Well, I applied word embeddings to start with to try to figure out, okay, so one person might say your service is really expensive, and another person might say your service costs too much. And it's very critical to realize that these two people say the same thing, And when you use language model, you can do it, and you can kind of group the feedback. And then once you can group it, organize it into a taxonomy, you can quantify it, and then you can present statistics about what's driving the NPS and what people should be focusing on in a way that is digestible, and people will then make decisions based on this data.
I want to come back to that, decisions based on the data. Before we get there, though, one of the things that you shared with me when we were getting to know each other and exploring being on CX Passport is you talked about your experience working for a tech startup in the past. And you'd shared with me that they raised a bunch of money, and they raised it by focusing on tech. But they didn't quite focus on solving customer problems, which, as you're describing Thematic, you found an issue, you started solving for that. It also kind of reminds me of how companies today go out there and just buy technology thinking it will solve everything without thinking about how it's going to help customers or employees, or perhaps even hinder customers or employees. So how are you going to avoid that particular risk with Thematic, the idea of this is technology, but how are you helping to bring it to where it's actually addressing customer and employee needs?
Well, I'm a huge proponent of content and writing blog posts about things that people are interested in. And what this means is that people come to us rather than we go seek out and try to sell them something that we have. And when people come to us, we talk to them and we try to understand what is the problem they're trying to solve. And we always offer a trial. So you can upload your data and see what it returns. Is this useful to you? Does it provide you with things that you didn't know that were in your data? So this is how we personally try to avoid building things that people don't need, because it's very easy, and we try to make this into like a company culture, because especially in the field of AI, it's so easy to get distracted by cool technology, a cool demo. It can do this, it can do this, but ultimately, what is in it for the customers and for people who need these problems solved?
I chuckled when you mentioned the cool demo. I believe, was it Google's AI demonstration? There was something very recently where they had put their cool demo on stage, and then it was revealed that a lot of it was not actually live demo. It was calculated and sort of scripted in the background. You weren't actually testing the engine, but rather it was responses that had been pre-programmed. So you're right, that cool demo, that technology focus, unless you're there solving for the customer's needs, then I can see how that might have a shallow or a short lifespan. You had mentioned something to me earlier, and it was this phrase that has stuck with me, and I think it's related to what I'd said we'd talk about a little bit later, but you talked about the democratization of insights. Would you amplify that for me? Why is the democratization of insights important in a business?
So what I mean by democratization of insights is making sure that everybody in the company who is making decisions can access the data required for that, and has the support they need to be able to interpret the data. Today, this is easier than ever because companies like ours have created natural language interfaces where you can simply ask a question and the data summarizes you the answer to your question. So you don't even need to be an analyst or an expert to have the data to support your decisions. So if what we've noticed is that among our customers, those who don't have a centralized function for insights, but instead, they still have the insights function, but that function basically works on to providing as many people with insights as possible. Those companies grow faster and are more successful. And so I believe that the less barriers are there that we remove between the data and people making the decision, the more effective will be their decision, rather than using gut feel and saying, well, I spoke to this customer and that's my most recent bit of nugget that I will now influence my roadmap. Right? It's very easy to kind of being swayed by the loudest voice, but ultimately you need to look at the data and build a bigger picture.
Yeah, that risk of the loudest, and even in some cases perhaps most frequent, isn't necessarily the same as the most impactful, can be a
That's
risk.
true.
What about the other side? By the way, I'm totally aligned with you. So let me, before I even ask this question, know that I like the idea of providing more information out there. Have you seen it be a challenge for a company with this democratization of insights? Have perhaps information overload, that there's so much available that because insights are no longer this closely held secret in a company, that it can overwhelm departments or teams that aren't accustomed to really absorbing that level of information? How can a company make sure that they balance, here's all of our insights, with here is just the tiny few that we think you need?
Well, I think the decisions that they're making every day should be driving what information they should be getting or they should be requesting, right? It needs to come
Mm-hmm.
from them rather than here's data, 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 data. Like I agree that too much data is not a good thing, and you will basically waste time trying to make sense of it. But if you are actually need to decide between A, B, and C, everybody has a limited budget, right? Like we
Right.
can't do everything. We need to decide, and as you say, impact on growth, NPS, CSAT. And
Really, that captured me there at the end. You may have seen the eyes kind of getting wide, or now it is that it's not that there's just this fire hose of democratization of insights. It's actually in the sense of be thoughtful as to what business decision you said that, what is the business decision that you're making, and then what information do you need to help support that business decision? Okay, the light bulb went off in my eyes, or in my eyes, the light bulb went off in my head, and I have a much better understanding of the democratization of insights now. I want to. I'm talking to somebody from across the globe, right? So I want to mix this up a little bit. If I were to fly to New Zealand, and I believe there will be nonstop flights from DFW to New Zealand, which shocks me. Well, if that's the case, that's going to be a really, really long flight. And so stopping off in the first class lounge would be really nice. And so that's what I want to do with you here today is join me here in the first class lounge. We'll move quickly and have a little bit of fun here. What is a dream travel location from your past?
for me, it was Hawaii, probably the
Okay.
most exotic location you can imagine for somebody being from Ukraine and being able to swim with turtles
Oh,
in their
yeah.
natural habitat. To me, this was mind blowing. I still think about it.
I have had the opportunity to do a swimming with the turtles, if you will, and it wasn't something that was scripted. You're just in an area in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and there is something so magical when you're just following them and you see the elegance and almost the grace that they have underwater. I can imagine that that's a memory that has absolutely been tattooed with you in your brain of how delightful Hawaii is. Let's go the other way. What is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Not a location, but I still haven't seen whales. And one day I hope to be able to be somewhere on a boat and experiencing a whale in their natural habitat. I
I
love
like that.
animals, so to me this is something magical.
When you're certainly in a great place of the world for animals and things that I might not be accustomed to. It's funny, Alyona, when you first said Wales, I was thinking you were talking about you know in the UK.
Oh, sorry, my
And
accent.
no, it was not the accent at all. It's the same sounding word, and I'm thinking, well, do you like the Wrexham Football Club? Is that? But no, it's the seeing the animal of the whales. I've never had that chance to do that, and I think that would be a lot of fun. And you may be the first guest that has pivoted that question on not a location but a trip, and I like that.
An
This is
experience, an experience.
ooh, somebody is in the customer experience space. I like that. Well played there. I like that. I like that a lot. Well, what is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
I don't know, chocolate, ice cream, fruit. But I feel like the more you eat of the same thing, the less you like that. So I think a diversity is important. And
You're
I also enjoy making cocktails and drinking
there we
them
go. Okay, I knew you and I had some very similar. We both like customer experience, and now we both like cocktails.
and
You're
travel.
walking. And travel, absolutely. So you are walking. I'm going to give you a little bonus first class lounge question here. You're walking into your favorite lounge. What is the cocktail you request?
Either Clover Club or Aviation.
Okay, I like it.
Aviation, since we're in flight or almost in
Okay,
flight. Yeah.
brilliant. I will have to. I will want to get the recipes for all of that so that we can. We'll get that off the air here and find out what that is. The other direction. You love lots of different foods. I imagine there's some things though that you might have been forced to eat as a kid, but you just hated growing up. What were those?
I had wonderful parents who thought that a child shouldn't be forced to eat anything, but yeah.
Wow.
But I still dislike onions even now, and I never ate them as a
No
kid.
onions for you. Is that true if they're raw, cooked, fried, or is it just all onions in general?
The more fried they are, the better.
All right. You're absolutely talking to this Texan's heart when you talk about fried food. Absolutely. Had me some chicken fried steak on Saturday, actually. Let's go back to travel. As we exit the lounge here, what is one thing, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
Headphones, when I travel, I think very useful to keep the noise out and feeling like you're in your space.
Well, I can completely agree with that answer as I'm wearing the noise canceling headphones that I was thankful to get when I was consulting with a well-known audio brand, Bose. And I absolutely getting to shut out the plane is quite nice when you've got those going. One of the things about Thematic, and it's very relevant in kind of a lot of the work discussions and style of work discussions that we are having as a business community today. Well, one thing about Thematic, it's not about work from home or work from the office. It's exclusively remote. Now, I admire and actually kind of envy your approach of living permanently in the summer by moving around the world. So making sure that you're living in summer. How does, whether it's moving for the hemispheres or just in general with your exposure to all sorts of parts of the world, how has that influenced your approach to customer and employee experience?
Yeah, I think any travel builds empathy. When we travel, we meet people from different cultures, people who have a variety of issues that are maybe different, but then we see how many of them are the same. And we end up connecting with different cultures. And in CX, and even in any company, empathy is so critical because this is empathy for customers is important. That's kind of what we're trying to do in the CX space. But ultimately, there's people in the company who need to do the right thing by the customers, actually act on the insights that we provide to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having empathy about what they need in order to act on those things is important. So, for example, a technical person is unlikely to respond to a single customer quote. They will straight away like, well, but how many customers is it affecting?
Right.
Right? So you need to understand there's people who work differently from you, and this is what they require. A technical person might want to see the data and some sort of an estimation that when they work on this, it will impact that many customers. And this is why they should be working on this. So that's kind of how I think about the connection between travel and working in CX.
Yeah, and that spirit, I'm being a little too glib here with this, but I often think that there would be a lot more, there'd be a lot less conflict in the world if everybody would actually travel. And even amongst our own, inside our own countries or inside our own communities and that sort of thing, if we would just be willing to expose ourselves to other thoughts, ideas, and experiences, we might find ourselves with less conflict. I realize that's a little bit too light, but at least it's something that this guy can hope for. Have you found, I want to ask you a little deeper around, because the employee element, especially in a company like Thematic that has global employees, if I understand that correctly, you've got employees
Yes.
around the globe. And so there might be cultural differences, there might be motivational differences, there might be experiential differences. How are you attacking it? And now let's not use that word. How are you addressing that inside of Thematic, recognizing, hey, we're one company, one culture, yet we are built of people from many different experiences and many different cultures?
Yeah, it's tricky, and building that connection between people remotely is, I find it's very tricky, and I don't think we've nailed it. There's just like benefits and of being remote for both the company and the employee, but the disadvantage is it's much more difficult to build this connection. How we have been doing this, we actually take our team to an annual retreat. We
Okay.
actually have met in Hawaii and went
I was going to
swimming with
say,
turtles.
did you go to Hawaii?
We did.
Awesome.
We did 2 in New Zealand as well, where we flew people over here. And for me, cooking together is what kind of, when we try to mix people up, and they cook recipes and they cook a meal, like a dinner together. And I feel like this really builds empathy.
I'm frozen a little bit, because what an absolutely genius idea from a corporate perspective, because we all have the foods that mean something to us growing up. That's even why I asked the question in the first class lounge, what is a favorite food to eat? Because there's something that there's emotional, and it's a symbolic element of who we are and what our culture is and what our experience is. And to use cooking as a way to bring that together. I actually have a story from when I was an employee at a US bank. This was decades ago. I couldn't tell you the exact year, but my manager actually invited, I was traveling to a town in which he lived, invited my wife and me over to his house, and we actually walked to the market. This was in Seattle. He got scallops and other things for a meal, and we just gathered together in his house while he cooked. We talked, we shared the meal together. There's something really unifying, and I felt so connected to him. And certainly my employee engagement shot through the roof through that. And so
Yeah.
that idea of cooking, what a brilliant idea. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Keep that.
It's,
And you clearly have just, there's a lot of folks listening to this going, well, I'm definitely going to put in my application to Thematic my annual trips to Hawaii or to New Zealand. Next time you need to have a whale watching trip.
yeah, creating these unique experiences, right? It all comes back to,
Yeah.
like, how can we really create something unique that they haven't experienced before? And I love cooking food from different countries, and
Oh,
yeah,
that's
it's very
awesome.
cool.
That really is. Yeah, I want to ask you about, because you've talked about empathy. A lot of what Thematic is doing is listening to or helping your clients listen to customers and then be able to discern the themes around that. Well, that it requires knowing how to listen to the customer. And one of the things that I really value, Bill Stakos is, if you don't know him, he's on LinkedIn. He's out there for listeners. He's a great follow when it comes to customer experience insight. He'll be on, or has been on this show as well. He coined and frequently reminds us that we are in a post-survey world. And so I'm curious, Alyona, if we're in this post-survey world, how do you think about how we can understand what the customer thinks and what their desires are and their needs in that post-survey world?
Well, I think what Bill means is that there's so much data around, and technology to digest this data got so much better. Why survey people? Because when you survey people, only a certain type of person is likely to respond. And instead, why don't we look at all of our call center data, all of the customer chats, complaints, sales notes, reviews? And I think it's incredibly important, but I also think that some people just like being asked. And so surveys will become shorter, or are already becoming shorter. You don't need to ask 25 questions, rate this, rate that. We just, what did you dislike? What can we improve?
Right.
And then let people actually say the specific things rather than needing a rating for everything. And similarly, analyze all of the call center data, because a lot of people need to have their issues solved in a more streamlined way.
Yeah.
So just a more holistic view of all of the ways in which customers want to communicate and are communicating with us.
Huge fan of the contact center, right? There's so much information, not only the call transcripts or the email contact, whatever the contact mechanism is, speaking with the frontline agents themselves and providing a mechanism for the frontline agents to inform the company, hey, guess what? This is what the experience really is. Here's where it's working well. Here's where it's broken. I also like how you, and I pushed back on Bill a little bit, that I still think there's going to be a place for some version of survey. What that means, though, is still certainly reduced like you're describing. And I think there's an element of the survey is a way, if I've got an experience that I've got to communicate with a company, either things went really well or this is so off the rails, the survey gives me that opportunity to communicate that off the rails aspect of it. And if we go completely away from it, I wonder if customers will miss that opportunity like you're describing for customers like me who want to have that opportunity. Well, Alyona, I'm looking at the clock and we're out of time here, and that saddens me. There's more that I'd want to ask you. I do want to ask you this, though. If CX Passport listeners wanted to get to know a little bit more about you and your philosophy around customer experience, or to get to know a little bit more about Thematic, where should they turn?
Well, they're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post regularly and I post a lot. And just Google my name and you'll find me. Otherwise, getthematic.com is our company's website. And there's a blog and useful resources around CX. And you can also request a trial.
Awesome. Well, I will get all that in the show notes. No need to Google or use Perplexity or any of your other new tools that are out there. I'll have that link there available to you. Alyona, it really was a delight chatting with you today. You've certainly opened my eyes in some areas, and certainly like in things like democratization of insights and how that manifests. And, you broke the rules, and I like it, on what's your dream travel location you've not been to yet. And I do hope that you get to see those whales very, very soon in your future. It has been fun having you on the show today. Alyona, thank you for being on CX Passport.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. It was always fun talking to you, Rick.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.